Good morning, everyone. Happy Faithful Fridays. Today is Friday, November 7th, 2025. And our purpose on Faithful Fridays is to combine an intersection where purpose meets rhythm and every drop of rain becomes a testimony. Today, and I say that because today in Valdosta, the sun rises on a warm and clear morning. We're expecting highs near 82 degrees with gentle winds and rain showers tonight. And let this forecast remind us that even sunny days prepare us for the rain, and every storm carries a promise. Amen. And I'm about to do my hair. The scripture reflections for today are Psalms 91:4. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are your armor. And John 15:5, where we are reminded that I am the vine and ye are the branches. And he says, abide in me as I in you, because the flesh cannot bear fruit by itself. You abide in the vine. You must abide in the vine. So as we abide in me, I forget, there was a song that I wrote based on that a few months ago, and I performed it on a first Friday. But hopefully I'll have a chance to revisit it. Another performance that I enjoyed that I did was one about, being a change maker and how, being a female out here, a lot of times you have people that'll stop you and say, you want to make some change? And it's like, what? And I was just so appalled by that. Had an opportunity yesterday on Thankful Thursday to bump into someone that said they were a comedian. And unfortunately I didn't, there was an opportunity to connect further. And I'll discuss a little bit about social and networking, once I get to that, because these are things that I'm developing with myself, as self-development engineer, founder and client zero of the Art of Good and Ministry of Agape Love. Again, where our purpose is to master the art of humanity through inclusion and provide a voice for the marginalized. And we do this through our 15 newsletters in 8 different languages, tied to each of our daily missions. And also through our EDSA content, educational, documentary, scientific, and artistic, everything that I post on video or social media, and I don't get a chance to post often because I'm doing everything on my own. And so what that means is that a lot of times, things are a little bit slower in rotation, but the intent is there. The slow and steady progress is there, so that's what it is. So once again, those were the scripture reflections. And again, our Faithful Friday outreach is this: as the rain approaches, we prepare, and we're preparing by taking inventory of the overflow from Thankful Thursdays yesterday. And we do offer refuge through music, warmth through fellowship, and protection through prayer. There is a purpose mapping workshop for today, and today we're reflecting on our talents, our passions, and our goals. I encourage you to create visual purpose maps that connect your dreams to your community needs. Mines are going to come in the form of spoken word, poetry reflecting my week, which has been crazy, and I'll share it with you. And I plan to perform this tonight actually, at a spoken word venue. Also, my purpose mapping is also going to be with my artwork, that's going to accompany each of my spoken word pieces, which is going to be like a long anthology covering the going-ons of the past week. As you know, one of our ministries is the Love Daily Ministry, which is Kwanzaa Revamped. And today's Kwanzaa principle, Love Daily Kwanzaa Revamped, and the reason it's revamped is because our people is not just indicating black people, but just people, God's people, which I think is so important. We don't want to have any isms, any divisions, and things like that. So again, just want to get the community involved through storytelling circles, mentorship mixers, and every act of care is a seed of purpose. So let's rise together in education, empowerment, and spiritual growth. And like I said, I'm not going to go through everything I went through over this week here. I am going to, like I said, put it in poetry form because it makes it a little more digestible. And, yeah. So Faithful Fridays is also Fruitful Fridays because our faith from our past Friday always yields great fruit for the current one. So we encourage for Fruitful Fridays to speak in truth and love, hold someone accountable. I did do that yesterday. And sometimes it's hard to do because it's a conundrum of where, you're getting something that really you can tell is deeply, deeply rooted and seated in love, but, other things are being overlooked. So we want to be good stewards of, our emotions and things like that by holding someone accountable. You deserve it, and also celebrate breakthroughs. I had the opportunity to do both of those yesterday. There was a breakthrough in a service that was provided that really, to be honest, there's no benefit at all. There's no way there could have been an underlying reason for that, based on what I know, So it was just out of pure agape love, and the individuals and the entities associated with the individual, whether it's, corporately or as an individual human, they came together to make true, my two key Bible verses on being intentional, which is, the slogan for that particular program is I love you with the love of Christ. And those two key Bible verses are James 2:15-16 that says, hey, you see somebody that's, starving and unclothed and you tell them, hey, go be warm, have a good night. That's not a good thing. You know what I'm saying? That's not being intentional. What good does it do, right? And I just came across that verse a couple of months ago, but I've been purporting this whole ministry thing forever because it's important to be intentional, especially when you're dealing, and I used to say marginalized people, but we're all the same. People are vulnerable in different ways, So, yeah, that's that. And the second verse is 1 John 3:15-16 that says, hereby perceive we the love of Christ, that, he laid down his lives for us. We ought to also lay down our lives for our brethren, because basically my children, action without, words without action is not truth. And is dead, basically. And when you get a chance, look them up for yourself. I used to know these by heart when I was actively doing my Christian connection, going to the churches, but they wore me down. They wore me down bad. I had to, for my own personal mental health and emotional health and so forth, I had to take it back a few notches. So, in closing, this is Faithful Fridays. It's a rhythm of restoration, a ministry of movement. Join us, share your purpose, and rise. And when I get a chance, I will share. I had some recordings and some visuals from Thankful Thursdays, and I do have residuals from Thankful Thursdays. And when I get a chance, I'll put that together and share those. So what I'll do as well, since I'm here already, is I'll go down my list for the clutter-free workout. And you got to forgive me, still not fully awake and activated on the inside, to be honest. Today was a late day for me. So the first one is emergency, and that's basically high-level security where there may be a danger or threat to individuals. It was reported that about 12 a.m., there was some scuffling and sounds that were going on. There was a huge truck that backed up into the pavilion, and there was vandalism that took place. Don't know, can't, say that it was the truck that did it. Coincidentally, there was a truck last October that kind of, that stopped an individual that frequented the park. Police were called. Proper authorities, law enforcement related and otherwise, were involved. That individual continued to, harass directly and indirectly even in the following year, leading to another individual also being able to do the same. But it was reported that approximately 7 o'clock a.m., it was observed that a whole trash can was missing from the park that, that park officials put out. And it could be that, maybe the park officials came and took the trash can, but what made us suspicious was that there initially were 4 trash cans, and one of the 4 trash cans ended up being completely missing a couple weeks ago. And that seemed plausible because the park worker was there and the trash can was there, and then all of a sudden the trash can was no longer there. So that could be plausible. But in this particular instance, it would have had to occur before sunrise. And in addition to that, the other 2 trash receptacles, and this is reports with community awareness, the other 2 trash receptacles were seemingly vandalized. The trash bags were taken completely out of the trash canisters. One of them was dumped and it was laid to the side. So it's not known that if the other trash can was stolen, or perhaps the park officials came out earlier than usual and did some work, which, is kind of doubtful. There are park officials that come out sometimes before sunrise, but through understanding or prior observations, they really, there's not a whole lot that they don't really do anything. I think they may just be kind of calibrating their day. They're just kind of sitting there. So yeah, that's the emergency. In addition to that, like I said, there was a hate crime committed last Friday. It was a hate crime racially motivated and possibly socioeconomically motivated as well, based on the slurs and things that were stated as the crime was being committed. The police were called. Due to the status of the individuals, it is not known that any actual police report actually took place. When asked, the report was stated that it would be through the fire department. The fire marshal was called. There was a fire that was set there before Caucasian teen arsonists. And again, that's just a description. And this is all just for educational documentary, scientific and artistic value only. It's not to, an attempt to bring malfeasance to anyone or anything like that. And another thing I want to let guys know, just an observation in being around, there's a lot of people that are living lives that are, it's about to go down, is all I'm about to say. There are a lot of people that, just like back in the day when racism was a thing, and it still is in some places because there's always residuals of hate. Like I said, last Friday it happened, but or October 31st, Halloween. But just like when racism was a thing, and there were people that, technically by bloodline were African American that could pass for white, the thing now, my daddy always said there's always going to be some way to divide, is socioeconomic classism. And, when people can throw in racism to help, put the pin in, they do. But what I'm noticing is that there are a lot of people that may really be indigent and not doing well that are passing. These are people that are sleeping in cars, dark tinted windows. These are people that, are living in abandoned homes and things like that. And the thing about it, or living in regular housing that's substandard and subpar, So when I say it's about to go down, with everything going on with the government shutdown and so forth and so on, and people becoming desperate, some of these faces are going to be revealed. You're going to start to see that it ain't what you think it is, For me personally, I live a life of peace, and I think that, this is how God intended us to live. Now I'm going to admit, this is a hybrid because, me actually doing this, version of self-care, my hair and all that, that's not in the basic plan, but it's a hybrid, and I think all of us, and I'm making up a word, are hybridized to, to the point of, where we can be, and, I don't know, it's about to go down because it's a lot of people. You think a lot of people are doing well or understanding, they're not. Like I said, I witnessed behaviors that, are very clear. There are a lot more people that are marginalized. And the scary part about it is the lower on the level you are of, supposedly, and I'm not, I'm changing that verbiage, I'm not marginalized. I'm completely in momentum. because it is a mindset. And when you allow yourself to believe that about yourself, or you purport that about yourself, you make it true. Last night I went to a police ethics forum, and hopefully I get a chance to upload all the stuff I'm talking about. But and like I said, in a previous video that I have not uploaded yet either, that and it wasn't any editing. I just hit record, but just haven't had a chance to get to a place where I could upload it, like physically to a place where I can upload it. But I was expecting like a huge community outpouring event. There was nobody there but the faculty, the staff. I don't even think I saw any students there. I was there. And then there was the panel, and the panel consisted of the police department, the city of Valdosta Police Department, the Valdosta State Security or Police, and then Valdosta State professors that were tied into criminal justice and law enforcement, right? So the topics that I wanted to discuss, and it was so interesting being in that situation and being present, and there was a fairly new reporter that I see all the time that, to me, I don't feel always have a good thing regarding responsibility, but being a person that hasn't been in university for 20, how old am I, 50, 25, almost 30 years, I was reminded that the things that they give to university students, especially when community people are not present to make it, real life, real lived experience, is really watered down. They're talking about social media presence and AI, and those things are very important, but, real lived experience, and I didn't feel comfortable discussing, the situation that happened previously, with the hate crime and all of that. So I just kind of left it there. As always, I do try to get contacts. I believe that if individuals had a perception of me when I left, based probably on the way that, I don't know, based on just things they picked up, maybe the way I carried myself or something, that kind of indicated that, I'm not someone in their group, I did make it clear I'm not a student. I'm a member of the community, and I heard the broadcast or whatever. But, yeah, that was concerning. When I get a chance, I'll get into that. So for the emergency, the security things that I noticed once again was, the park was vandalized last night, Sometimes things happen due to animals. This was not the situation in this particular case. There was actual vandalization that took place. So that was the emergency part. Spirituality, I have a prayer, and usually this is when I would like to go do the Mile and Manor and walk around the track and sing my homemade songs. And I'm wondering, well, I'm not going to say that right now, but I kind of wonder if the guy that walked me out of the park when that hate crime happened, or the day after, if he's okay, because I haven't seen him, but it might just be where, he's a little bit younger. Like I said, most of the people that I run into are 20 to 30, around there, give or take a year or two, right? And maybe somebody older, because he does talk to older people, just said to him, hey, don't you, communicate with that person, because if that person is being targeted, you could be at risk, right? So that may be the situation, or they may have just decided on their own, hey, this female is not, on the level of people that, I communicate with as far as appearance and, whatever. So, whatever the case may be, but again, I'm thankful. Spirituality, I will go ahead and go over the Lord's Prayer versions for today, and I think I shared a bit of that. I should have, at least. Maybe I didn't yet. I think maybe I didn't. I'll get back to it. But anyway, it's just re-reviewing with the Growth Academy highlights. For the wildflowers, those are them. Those are the individuals that are seeking to grow. They're on the base level, foundational level of growth. And I think we all are a little bit of everything. We have the whole universe in us. So, those of us that are wildflowers are also gardeners in our own respect. The wildflowers are developing, the skills of setting goals, building resilience, finding and locating opportunities, using wisdom in work, not just doing things just because, oh, I have a job, or I have, this is what I'm just going to do this just out of, being on autopilot, but actually, making decisions that are going to, help them obtain sustainable work. Truth and time management. And that is, again, not just giving your time to everyone, just because someone, may look like they may be able to have more resources or better in that type of way, in a worldly sense, than you, not just giving your time freely. You're being intentional that, with me giving my time to this person by talking to them, by outreaching, or attempting to outreach, that, there's a desired result. I'm looking for people that really want to grow, that have the opportunity, within themselves to listen, to understand, to see past, just the blanket thing that's covering it, veil that's in the front, because a lot of times things are veiled, perception management and things like that, right? So, and then I'm looking for honest growth partners, honesty, wildflowers are looking for honest growth partners, people that are going to be honest with them. I had a situation yesterday, like I said, where I said, hey, this information, I addressed a situation where that kind of is a parallel to what I initially, when I shared my business plan, stated that, with people that, and initially I said marginalized, like I said, we're not there no more anymore, but with people that are marginalized, the threats that they have are, theft of intellectual property is one of them. And every single threat, I listed about 5 or 6 that I had at that time, it was nicely pushed forward on me without apology, without apology, unapologetically, boldly, okay? And I addressed that, and one of the things that is really required is honesty. And that's the first thing that people won't give you. When people are being dishonest with you, they're not looking towards benefiting you in a way that's going to exude growth. And I communicated this in a different way yesterday in a final communication that I had yesterday evening. For gardeners, for the Growth Academy highlights, you're experiencing and sharing, you're sharing your actual growth, you're radiating out your successes and your accomplishments so that you may plant seeds into the community so that you will have some form of ownership, and also provide ground that's fertile for others to have their own form of ownership. And I think I am going to do my Mile and Manna walk today. That's something that should be done every day, but it's scheduled for Mondays just because I haven't been in the Word lately, and a big portion of that is going over the Lord's Prayer, direct translation from Aramaic, and the Prayer of Wisdom, which I've combined into one. Again, the purpose mapping workshop that I talked about before, let's reflect on our talents, passions, and goals. And again, we're creating visual purpose maps that connect our dreams to our community needs. All the experiences that I'm going to paint and develop spoken word for today are going to, show demonstrations of what the community needs are. And in some cases, things to be thankful for. And, the results of our faith, right? Faithfulness. And again, just a reminder that every act is a seed of purpose. So again, we're going to rise together in education, empowerment, and spiritual growth. And again, as the rain approaches, we do prepare, taking inventory of the items that were received and to be distributed through Thankful Thursdays overflow, and all of us have this overflow. A lot of times and that's the thing about my Christian bingo and scavenger hunt. There's things that you have at home that you don't want or need, or that you've been saying you're going to repurpose or give away that you never do because you don't have time, to actually go through and repurpose, or don't have the social connections to know somebody that you think would actually individually really need it. So you end up just donating to places. But, if you can take the time, and I know time is valuable and it's short, because for me, like I said, I have a good heart. I'm trying to do everything. And this is a passion that has been mine forever. Even I don't always have the time, but yesterday I sat out with my box, decorated my little box, my little overflow box, and I'm glad to say that we were able to distribute to 1, 2, 3, 4 families, that I know of. There may have been people that came by that I didn't know of because I wasn't on site. But yeah, and that's, to me, is a blessing. It's a start, and it starts small. You know, you have to be thankful for the little things. Be faithful in the little things, before God really blesses you with the big. And like I said, it does take a lot of work because, just with the normal this is base level stuff, social media and things like that, And if you're a perfectionist, oh no, you're going to want to sit and edit and everything and get feedback on everything. But then it comes to a point where you realize, the reality of things is just better. You'll just put it out there. And I say this too, and it's so funny how God introduces us to ourselves. As I was sitting out here, I think it was on What We Need Wednesdays, I was sitting out here, and I just remember the story. There was a guy, and again, you never know. I have so many speculations about things, but he came out here and he spoke, and he was saying that, he was describing himself harshly because that's how the criminal justice system, wants you to feel about yourself. But he says, he's an ex-felon. He basically, and whenever you have a felony issue, the time that's recommended is at least 5 years or whatever. So he was in prison for 5 years, and when I asked him for what, he's just kind of made a blanket statement. He did a lot, but he's into boxing now, and he really loves, being a part of community and children and teaching boxing. And he recognized me because he offered me a water. And one time, and he was with, I said, oh yeah, I saw you with your friend. He was like, yeah, he was actually training this young lady to box, and all this, that. And as we were talking and sharing and, kind of communing on, I think what we had in common was the desires to develop our communities, And I think all of us at different levels have the power to do that, even though somebody's like a hate crime person, they feel like they're developing the community by eradicating people that they feel, shouldn't be in it. But, from a point of love and wanting to educate and grow, youth and children. And so we talked on that level, and what he said to me, and there were a lot of things that, again, being a person that's highly visible in our work, do my work in creative spaces, public places, I'm very visible, and depending on, whether I'm on open FaceTime, which, until recently, maybe the last week or two, I haven't been. I've been in closed-in space. I'm just doing my work, whether it is working on myself out here, doing yoga, exercising, and I just started doing my hair, but, or preparing, meals that I plan to share, and things like that. You're very visible, and sometimes when people see you that visible and you're by yourself, which I'm not intending to be by myself, but I think because of all that, people are kind of, they have to get used to you and see that, you're not crazy, because that's the that is the narrative for, people that, are in places a long time, because they think you're just there, but I'm not, I haven't made a full sign since Tuesday because I've been so busy. I did a partial on Wednesday, didn't even post it, and my signage yesterday wasn't my full signboard, which is going to go up, and I didn't even do the sign for the community alert. I mean, I started it, but it's just so many things back to back. The amount of crazy things back to back, and then productive things back to back that happen on the spur of the moment. So managing all of that. But I think I should trim this hair. I think I should. I don't like all those fuzzy ends. But we'll work on that later. We're just gonna get it flat iron for now. But and this was trimming my hair was something that I had planned like a week ago. I had gotten the scissors and everything. But due to all the goings-ons, the plans and everything else, I haven't had the opportunity to do that. So yeah, so as the rain approaches, we prepare again by taking inventory of the items that were overflowed from Thankful Thursdays, and planning to redistribute them throughout the week, as we can, and maybe bring awareness. I'm not sure how to do it because, like I said, with the president, even with Thankful Thursdays, like I said, the folks that I was familiar with, they came out, that was good. One of the things I did try to do is like people that I walk past, let them know, hey, this is going on. Now, some of those folks were marginalized, and because, they were marginalized, but haven't been really pointed out or been that visible. So with me being visible, they don't want nothing to do, and it's wisdom, it's self-protection because, of everything that's going on. And then there's people that are not marginalized, that are so far removed from marginalization that they see you and they think, oh my gosh, if you can imagine like a beggar come into somebody, it's not, I'm like, hey, I got some items over here, it's overflow from a local food pantry. But they're not hearing, they're responding based on, what they're seeing, that, they've just seen you here and ain't nobody else, So it's rebuilding that confidence, in the community. And then you have people that are marginalized that are living in cars that, again, if they see how these people are responding to you, they got to make it clear that you're not part of them. You know what I'm saying? And then you respond the same way. And that was the same instance that I had with, the girl that initially recognized me from the spoken word event, but then was just like, oh, no, we don't know her, not, that she's one of them, so I got typecast. So, pulling myself out of that because I deserve so much. I am more than that. And back to this man that was speaking to me, he started out with saying, and I think the generation that's like 60 and over, when they see folks that are marginalized, the common word is on the streets. And I was just so offended. I was just like, what? He was just like, something about being out here on the streets. And I was just like, the streets, who's out here on the streets? I'm not on the streets, And he was like, well, what do you call it? And I was like, well, look around you, And I was just like, this is how God intended, for us, for people to live, surrounded by things that he created, And if I could get more of this, I would, but the way that it is, all the cities and everything are becoming more and more urbanized. You're not going to have, unless there's not going to be much space that's naturally, just the way that God created it for you to enjoy, and then you probably have to pay for that. So, but yeah, so, it was so many things that he said, that really, it was like he wasn't clearly observing, then he was just like, oh, and I told him, that basically, a lot of times the issues that people have, is related to systemic barriers and social dynamics. That's me, in regards to jobs and things like that. What I'm finding is that people are getting paid not to do their jobs. If you go to your, like my daddy said, the nail that sticks up that gets hammered down. If you go to your job and you do too much, or you're super focused on just the job, people don't like that. You don't fit in so good, Or, if you follow everything by the book and to the T, you reveal what others do that is not to the T. Now, and, inadvertently, there are people that, my daddy always said as well, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. You have people that are doing some really, really bad things that have really, really good reputations, have come in contact with them personally, and only some of them. And I know that those are the most dangerous people ever, because they have the power and the influence to paint you as something that you're not, without even saying a word, really, with just the way that they respond and interact to you. And that is kind of scary, And that is why it's so important, I think, to change your mindset. Mindset was on Monday, but it's okay. To change your mindset, to make sure that you know who you are and that you value who you are, because there are people that are happy to get you to believe that you are less than what you are. And if they can get you to believe that and behave in that way, and a lot of us are good people, are people pleasers to a certain extent, we want that, we want to please you. And so if it's easier for you to manage or deal with me, and I've heard art from African American females that said that that they lessen their light in different ways. Those are my words, their words were different, but to diminish yourself in order to make others comfortable. But you have to fully claim your space and claim who you are. It doesn't mean that you're being aggressive, assertive, but you're letting your light shine. And I think that sometimes the way that social dynamics and systemic barriers work is to dim your light, because sometimes that brightness and that truth hurts people. So we have to be fully and authentically who we are. We deserve that. And if we believe in God and we believe that God creates everything, the community around us deserves that. It deserves us to operate at our full potential, not mediocrity. And that's what I believe work does, Now, the thing is that some of us that are very passionate, like myself, you burn the candle on both ends and you can end up burning out, or you're trying to do so much where you're starting this, starting that, starting this, that, and that. And, it becomes a lot. But the thing is, practice makes perfect. And as you start to work towards your goals, towards your missions, and through your purpose, you start to learn how to weed out those things that you don't necessarily have to do right now. You start to learn, and this is what not to be so hard on yourself, that, hey, I am this, that, and the other. I do this, that, and the other. And it takes some time to get back around. And to be honest with people and let them know, hey, that's the situation, I think honesty is always key. Transparency. Some things, like I said, if people don't have your best interest, they can use anything against you. They can use the fact that I'm sitting here, if they love you, somebody be like, oh, wow, she's doing her self-care and taking care of herself. What a beautiful thing. And others may perceive it differently, So it's just, it's about valuing yourself, because nobody can love you like you. And when you love yourself, you're loving the world around you. Because if you're being anything less than what you're meant to be, you're hurting the world. You're depriving the world of the presence and grace and beauty that God instilled in you. But anyways, like I said, the Faithful Friday Challenge is to speak truth in love. Hold someone accountable. Celebrate your breakthroughs. Share your scripture reflections. And again, remember that we bear fruit only when we abide in Him, per John 15:5. So once again, map your spiritual gifts, discover your divine design. And I shared with you the last time I performed, it was a snippet of a song that I just sang, that song that I sang earlier, or try to remember because I don't remember all of it now, to promote my organization. And this first Friday, I will be offering storytelling through spoken word and artwork for the Art of Good. Okay. And the spiritual reflections, these are different snippets. What I did was, when I did wrote up my mission plan, I did rotations of the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic for each week, for each day of the week. And some days ended up with more rotations, like more different ones. So for Friday, the prayer themes are: 1, forgiveness, untie the tangled threads of destiny that bind us as we release others from the entanglement of past mistakes. And the color associated with forgiveness is going to be rose quartz, and it represents love, inner peace, and turquoise, which represents protection and wisdom. Amen. And then, speaking of wisdom, my second prayer, and again, we're going through our clutter-free workouts. We did 0, which was the emergency. Now we're on the spiritual portion, and I just revamped everything for Fridays. Is asking the God to, make wise decisions. Lord, instill in me a reverent fear of you, that I may be wise in my decisions. And then the last prayer for today is that not by sight alone, grant me the courage to make choices not by sight alone. So, if you're sitting in a car and you see me sit here, don't make your choice just based on the fact that there's someone sitting there. Make your choice back on the fact, let me see if I can open this box of chocolates. But I'm going to admit, now I'm in open-facing, community-facing mode, whereas I wasn't before. So people were probably like, what's going on over there? But yeah, I'm in community-facing mode. So if you see me, don't be afraid. Come speak. I promise you, everything is good mentally, spiritually. God, financially, the greatest form of exchange is, your energy, and what God has provided naturally, right? So, and socially, like I said, we're working on it, and, once I have my cause and people, and connect with people that share the same values that I have, and they realize and can see that these are the values that I have, and they truly and authentically have it, because it's a possibility that a lot of people don't have those values anymore. I've come into a lot of a lot of fence riders, but that's just the way the world is. And my daddy said, another word from my dad, he says, Maria, most of the world operates in the gray area, not in the black and white, so people are not really that pure, So again, we also celebrate today Flame Fridays. We're going to explore, I talked about the single ministries and some of the things that, with the single and satisfied married to Christ, with the C's ministry, and now I have my device in front of me. Like I said, I haven't been in practice with it so much, and so I didn't have it all. I had it all. I did have it all, but I let it slip away because I wasn't practicing, like Mariah says. But the C's ministry is the level just under Married to Christ, Single and Satisfied Married to Christ. And it stands for Sanctified Expression of Empowered Singleness. You love being single. You want to be around other single people. The Single and Satisfied, you know, pretty much you devote your whole life to God. You can spend all day and all night with God and be good, you know, and do your little things to help out. And then the lowest level, you can look at this as the id, you know, the ego, the super ego, the ego, and you can look at the lowest level as the id, which is the CX. And that's basically the central energy exchange. And it's an effort to, you know, overcome those things. So, you know, you have to take steps sometimes depending on where you are. And like I said, as a middle-aged woman, my hormones are a little weird now. It's like I'm single and satisfied, married to Christ. However, once a month, when the cycle comes, I get these weird tinges and whatever. And so it's like a scale for me. And you know, but I think that the more that we talk about it, and I'm open with it, you know, if, you know, something happens where I feel like I'm acting weird or somebody perceives, you know, and sometimes it's so weird. It's like all of a sudden I get flushed, like absolutely hot. It could be 20 degrees out here. I'll be flushed from my head to toe. I got to get away from everybody and everything. Got to take everything off. But from what I'm understanding, there was communication that males get like that too, from an older male that was with his lady that we had a chat out here. And, you know, and luckily, you know, there are instances where, you know, mature males or mature people understand. They're just like, you know, yeah, I get it, you know. And so it's definitely a thing. It's reality. It's not made up. And then some people have a problem talking about it because they feel like it's something against their character, you know. But not necessarily. It's a natural thing, and people need to understand. And people need to know the appropriate Christian way to get through that, you know, and need to have the tools to do it. But if you hide everything and you cover everything, then how do you heal it? And I was talking to someone about this last night. I was talking about how much I used to work out, all the time, and I need to get it back. And the thing about it is working out, you know, you have to see everything. Just like a sculptor. You have a block of wood or clay or whatever it is you're sculpting, and you have everything in front of you. And then to make your masterpiece, you have to decide what is it that doesn't look like what your end goal is. You know, what is it? Just carve away everything that doesn't look like that. Same with your body. You carve away everything that doesn't look like that. But you have to have it all. You have to be able to see. You have to be able to, you know, for me, you have to be able to see. You wear clothes where you can see that, right? And the same thing with, you know, your spirituality. You know, if you're hiding all of your, you know, indiscretions or your sins or things that you perceive to be indiscretions or sins, which just could possibly be human nature, it's part of our human nature, then, you know, how do you carve away those parts that don't represent, which effectively represents you in Christ, because in Christ in you, right? So that's where I come with that. And the newsletter that I shared with the young man, and I have a few, and like I said, there's so much going on. We're not going to talk about church, but thank you so much, you know. And this is something else God is teaching me. You know, I am judgmental, you know. I didn't realize this at first, but I realized in my receiving that I am. And sometimes we can't be, because everything in this world was made by God, right? And God placed everything there for His divine purpose. Even those things that, you know, sometimes may hurt our feelings or may be a thorn in our side, or are perhaps not operating the way that we believe they should. But remember, we don't lean to our own understanding. It's God's, His divine purpose, you know? So with this being said, a couple of years ago, you know, when I still was traditionally housed, you know, like I said, this was during my first active outreach to the churches. I were outreach to a church where the director was, you know, head of a partnership for where they use homeless and whatever. And I was just like, well, you know, that's perfect. And then people that were in church there also thought that it was perfect. You know, they felt like, you know, yeah, you need to, and, you know, just innocently, the girl was a secretary. She felt like, you know, well, you need to meet our pastor. He works with these types of people, that and the other. And I was like, oh yeah, I know him, you know. But the thing about it, God may do his good in his own way, and I was a little bit offended because I heard the sermons and, just different things, but I'm not going to put it all together. But basically, the culmination of it all came to where, when I transitioned from traditional housing, where I was just like, well, I needed a mailing address, so, let me use this as a mailing address. And that was the service that they provided, which I think is a very good service to provide, by the way, whether you're an organization that caters to helping the community grow, or if you're an individual, that takes time and hand selected individuals that your spirit speaks to, that says that you don't mind, growing them and creating them. It's a great service to offer because it is needed, for little things, like phone service and this, that, and the other, But I made it clear because when I made a query for a certain type of benefits on my own, and I saw that it was taking a very long time, and at that time maybe it was taking a very long time for everyone, and people were saying through the grapevine to me, hey, let this individual do it. And I know from prior experiences that, when you go through organizations and you have them do it, that it goes faster because it says that, hey, there's a critical situation, whatever. So I'm like, okay, I filled out my own stuff. I sent it. It shouldn't be no big difference. They were like, well, this person knows people there, and so they might have pull. So, and that person was very nice, by the way. Great person. It's a human being, right? But, like I said, systemic barriers. But it culminated in, me stating, hey, and you have to allow them to open your mail for that to happen. But I didn't see any results. So I was just like, hey, I'm going to remove that authorization status. And I made sure that the agency that, supplied those benefits knew as well. And so from this point forward, I'm going to request that you please do not open my mail. But then I went to check my mail, and I was looking for something, and the mail was open. But I was like, why would it be open if they're not authorized to open it? So not only was it open, the envelope was thrown away. So I didn't even know when that communication was sent so that I could actively do my due diligence and following up on it. And the director got mad because I mentioned it, hey, is it possible that you could not, I made it clear. And he was like, well, you should have put it in writing. I said, I did put it in writing. I said, and that's how I am. I do things verbally, in writing, in person, on the phone, verbally, in writing, in person, in text, any form of communication I can. I try to make sure that I hit all forms of communication regarding that, so it's no mistaking. If you're a person that checks emails more frequently, or texts more frequently, or voicemails, or you like the face-to-face interaction. But I try to do the in writing first because, people will sometimes try to switch things up and say something wasn't said. No, I said it verbally. I said it on paper, and I came to let you know verbally the same thing. There's no confusion. And so they said, well, instead of just correcting it and being like, hey, we're sorry that we opened that mail. We'll try to, not do that again. They were just like, well, you're just one person. Why would we, specifically not open the mail for just one person? Because, it's the law. You're not supposed to open mail that don't belong to you, that you're not authorized to do, just because you can get away with it, or there's a minority of people. And ironically, the people that were supporting this, are of what's considered to be minority race. That's what they said, But, I left it alone for a long time. I had different situations that happened. And like I said, don't ever write off an individual or an organization because, God owns everything. And he used you in that situation to make a change. Just like the opposite is true. Sometimes God uses other people, and you to be a thorn in their side to make a change, or to, and that's what happened. So I was in a situation where, I said, like with the outreach and stuff, I was going to go get the food, going to go get this, that, and the other. I needed an extra backpack, because, like I said, I go through backpacks like crazy. And in this lifestyle, and not even just this lifestyle, but being a pedestrian, and you doing grocery shopping or going to get resources, and you're not taking a cart that has a wheel on it, those bags are heavy. And a lot of times those things that you get for free are cheap, that you haven't selected. So it's not going to take much wear and tear. All it takes is a couple gallons of water, or a few canned goods, and before you know it, things are falling out all over the place, And if you're someone that has a ministry, and like I said, and you're a mobile ministry, you carry a lot of your tools with you. and tools for marketing like this, I consider a marketing tool, because we need to get it together so people are okay with speaking to me, or a little bit more okay with speaking to me, because this doesn't mean anything. They could be just crazy ladies parked on hair. But the thing about it is, these are marketing tools. This is a marketing tool. I want you to be able to relate to a point to where, when you see me, just like when I think about, a certain council person, I remember, and it's a joke to myself, and I think I may have shared it with them, that, when I was looking for a well-to-do, polished black woman, and she can be that way. But what I saw was somebody that looked like they were on crack. but when you're putting your hands in the work and you're getting down and dirty, you're getting it from the ground, that's what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? And what a blessing, to be so selfless, where you can get in like that, and you're not caring about all that. And with a higher blessing, and it goes through scales of up and down, like I said, a higher blessing to be able to put yourself together in a way afterwards to let people know that, hey, I can do this too. So yeah. So anyways, where did we get through? We went through spirituality because we went through the prayers. But also, I do try to read, I was in the process of reading the whole Bible, and I've been stuck on Jasher, or is it Jasher? I've been stuck on Jasher for the longest time. Jasher chapter 32. So I'm going to read, we're going to go through reading, trying to get through chapter 32. I think I probably read through it, then forgot I read through it, then read through it again because it's been so long since I picked it up. But I'm going to go back through Jasher 32 again, because even now when I open up the reading, it's taking me to 31, but I know for certain I finished 31, so we're not doing 31 again. So Jasher 32. And again, Jasher is a book, an apocryphal book. It's a deuterocanonical book, and those books are books that, basically the Catholic Church uses as a more full version. And I also am reading the Lost Books. For those of you that don't know, and we're exploring spirituality, the Bible, the Holy Bible that we're used to seeing, it's not written in chronological order. And a lot of us will probably never in a lifetime get a chance to read the whole Bible unless you're paid to do that. But, in a way I am, because like I said, this is a form of me working just for God. But the thing about it is it's not in chronological order. So what I've done is I've gone through and placed the Bible in chronological order with help of online tools, of course, because, there's no way I would know how to do that on my own, or I could, but it would take forever and tons of research. Let the system research it for you. That's what I did. So I am in Jasher's, and this is Jasher 32. And of course, you can download, if you want to download an apocryphal Bible, you can look up King James Version Apocrypha from the Google Play Store. Or you can download separately. I think they have Enoch, Jubilees, and Jasher. And speaking of Jubilee, for those of you that don't know, Jubilee represents the 50th year of living. After 49 years, 7 years of 7 have passed, which is 49 years. Everything is reset. Everything is reset, so you're back to where, just acknowledging God and His presence. And ironically, that is exactly where I am. December 15th will be my 50th year, breathing oxygen, being blessed, with this wonderful gift of life. And amazing. Like, the feeling that I get right now, this is genuine. I'm not intentionally being weird or whatever, but if you heard that song by, I may not be pronouncing the name correctly, but Dennis Sher-Pole, he's Dominican, D-E-N, Dennis Sher, I don't know how to pronounce it, Dennis Sher-Pole, I don't know how to say it right, but the name is spelled D-E-N-I-C-H-E-R, last name is P-O-L, called Inexplicable, Unexplainable, and it says basically, this is exactly how I feel, when you touch me, with your Holy Spirit, I cry, I tremble, and I sing. And it's true, if you get a chance, listen to the song in Spanish first. If you want to or need to, translate it into English. And if you're not the kind of person that likes to stay in Spanish, then translate it into English and, recreate the song in English. But it's so beautiful, you guys. And that's exactly the way that I feel. When the Holy Spirit touches me, it just takes over. I mean, it's like I can feel the immense love. And when I talk about this too, I talk about when the Holy Spirit comes to me through other people. Like I said about how, God has sent people to help me. And it's true. And God teaches me so many lessons, like on a daily basis. It's like a continuous download. The guy that was with the police dog guy that was out here, I think he called me, he said something and gave me some kind of compliment. And I know, like in past weeks, I had gotten offended because some guy said, and this is the lesson God taught me, basically the guy was out here, and actually I was connecting with him, I thought, really well. I think that we connected on the fact that we were both quiet individuals. And then I learned, I think because I asked him what did he do for a living, he said he was retired. I said what did he used to do, and he used to do martial arts. We connected on that, but then he made a comment, and then for me, I was starting to be on the outward facing with the ministry or whatever. But he made a comment that, he had asked me if I wanted something from the store, and I was like, actually, I have $9 and I need a flat iron out to put towards it. Ironically, the flat iron cost me $3, and some friend girls came out here. Well, friend girls at the time. God, it's not just with men that God sends people temporarily. He sends people temporarily, regardless of gender. But so that's what they did. And I think they made a show of getting McDonald's. I don't eat McDonald's, but okay. I did it because they were just like, and what are you getting? And I was just like, nothing. And they just looked at me, and I was like, and so they went ahead and they purchased whatever. And of course, greedy woman I am, you put it in front of me, I eat it. And I don't like to waste too. So that's that. But what he says to me, and in hindsight, I still don't like it, but what God taught me from the situation was that, and I'll tell you all the different, potentially embarrassing things that went along with that too. What God wanted me to learn from that situation, though, is that sometimes God does send people to bless me with his words, and that this is the way that God sees me. God sees me as beloved. He sees me as beautiful. He sees me as all of these things. But I think what got to me was like, again, when I come across people, especially people that are a little bit older, even though I am older, in my heart, in a lot of ways, I'm still a child, And like I said, I'll with good spiritual people that are kind, especially if it's male folks, I blush from the inside out. But if it's people that, to me, they have a father figure feel, they might not necessarily feel spiritual and kind, but they feel like a father figure, kind in that way. I don't feel the spirit glowing from them, but I feel that they're kind and they're like a father figure. I start to get like a little child. I start getting giddy and wanting to share all my information and everything I want to do. I'm trying to do everything that I like. You know what I'm saying? That's how I get, And to me, that's a blessing, because to still have a zeal for life and to be fascinated, again, education, documentary, and scientific purposes only, y'all, to be fascinated by life in that way. What a blessing, that you could still, even your heart can revert back to childhood and just be able to share like that. And so that's where I was with him. I even trusted him to do little moves, and he did show me things that really were helpful. And I didn't realize that Taekwondo was actually self-defense, even though I am self-defense. Because, again, culturalized, Americanized, and my hair feels so sticky. But yeah, so I didn't even realize that. But what ends up happening is that he was like, oh, you're gorgeous. You're so gorgeous, and this, that, and the other. And I started to feel like a little girl being molested, because he kept saying you're gorgeous. That part I didn't mind. But then, and forgive me, I'm blind without my glasses, so I'm not, doing half eye, and this is not, even though my eyes are small, this is not natural, because I really can't see, my eyes are weak. But so what ends up happening is, but it's easier to do your hair with it, with that going on. So with all that being said, but that was fine. The gorgeous part, he kept saying it over and over. But again, the childhood blushing thing, I, ignored it because it was making, like a child, I was starting to blush. So I ignored it. But then he went from that, because, okay, she ignored that, to, oh, you have a really nice body. And at this point, I'm getting a little not happy because I'm like, I'm straight up and down. You know what I'm saying? For one. And then for two, and maybe I took it the wrong way, and then for two, there's nothing that I'm wearing that accentuates my body in any way. I'm all in black and everything's pretty practical that I'm wearing, right? In my opinion. Again, this is my opinion because somebody else may not feel that way. And I get that. And I can see how opinions may differ on that. But then, he kept saying that, that you have a nice body. You have a nice body. Because I had talked about that I worked out before. But, whatever. And then he went from nice body to nice thighs. Now he's talking about specific body parts now, And so I felt cheap. I felt cheap because, even though for the ministry, he asked me did I need anything. And, I'm realizing that it wasn't for the ministry, that's, But, and then he was like, oh, I was just going to the store up here. And so I realized that he meant the corner store, to buy booze or liquor. And I was just like, oh, no, I don't drink. That's okay. But I felt so cheap because I permitted him to make those comments on an escalating scale, and I felt cheap, and I didn't like that. And then what ends up happening is, and then the ladies came, and when the ladies came through, I guess to normalize his behavior, because I did speak on it, he offered them a beer. He offered them specifically a beer. I'm going to, would you like this like a beer? And see, that's a specific thing. So there's a difference. And I call this gaslighting. And, when there's a difference in the way that people approach things. He didn't make any comments about their body, if they physical attractiveness, if they were gorgeous, if they had a nice body. He didn't make those comments. So there's a difference. And then he specifically offered beer. And I thought, well, maybe he just learned his lesson. And that's what it was, right? But then another thing that made me feel cheapened was, on top of that, and like I said, I don't know anything about, social interactions and manipulation. I don't know how to do any of that, right? I don't know how, okay? And it's pretty clear, pretty clear. I'm just open and honest, happy-go-lucky. That's who I am. I don't know how to manipulate and make people think, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. So the irony about that is that then it went from there to my hair could really use a good blow dryer with a comb, but we're not going to worry about that right now. And actually, I can get it now. Thankful Thursdays. So, but I just have to have the time to go shopping for it. And actually, I think I have something else that I need to do right now, so I might not be able to do that right now. But I have a lot going on today. But I do want to get through these stories and these lessons and these blessings. The lessons are blessings that God has given me. That, not every compliment, he might have been genuine. And let me tell you why. And I just took it the wrong way because, he's mentioning, even though I feel like a child on the inside, I'm not a child. I'm a grown woman. I'm 50. You know what I'm saying? And so he's mentioning this because, I guess if you're talking to a grown woman that purports that she used to work out, him stating that I just didn't like the way it felt, though, to be honest. I don't like the way it felt. Stating that, in itself it's not a big thing, But it also taught me, too, that I have to be mindful of when people make offers and receipts, that even though I'm ministry-minded and it, that, again, it could be perceived differently, And so when people make offers, just like yesterday, someone offered, because my hair, y'all saw what the hair looked like this morning, the curly puffies. And the guy that I was talking about that offered to do my hair before that, I was like scared. And actually, I'm going back and forth. So I can't lean to my own understanding. I don't know everything. He saw me outside yesterday and he came up to me and I was telling him, okay, I have this box of stuff. If you want anything out of it, grab it. I also have stuff under the pavilion. Help yourself, He said something to me. I didn't understand what he said. And he was asking me if I needed some hair grease. And I was like, no, I have everything I need, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized that the reason that he was asking me for this was because, like I said, he actually did an okay job with my hair before. And I had hair grease, and it didn't do that curly, puffy thing. And so I think that he just likes doing women's hair. He said he had 8 sisters. And he doesn't seem, I don't know, it just gets too much where I'm thinking too much about his personal business, not my business. It doesn't seem gay or anything. But the thing about it is that he saw that and he was just like, you needed to put some, he didn't say that to me, but that's the reason that he said it, right? So just starting to realize, you know, and the thing is, my response to that should have just been, I think I responded the way that I felt was appropriate. I don't need anything, but I should have said what would have been more gracious, like, on Wednesdays, that's my organization, for folks that want to donate or give to me, so I have a What We Need Wednesdays, but right now, hair grease is not something that is needed. However, I do have a Christian Bingo scavenger hunt card, which lists, things that may be wanted or needed that, you or someone may have laying around, or that you may ride past and see on bulk trip pickup day. And, I'll be happy to receive those items. And if you would like one of those cards, when next time I have one available, I can't say just, on Wednesday, because I can't, I have so much going on. But next one time I have one available, I will share it with you, and and you can use it and distribute it, as you feel appropriate. Apply it and distribute it. That's what I should have said. But it's a growing process. We're not going to know everything at one time. It takes a while for us to get the right answers. Yeah. So we went through a spiritual. I was supposed to be reading Jasher. And the thing is, when I read, I need to read a whole chapter. How long is chapter 31? It's a lot of verses. It's a lot. It's not going to happen. Not today. So it's chapter 32, because I have a lot of other stuff to do. So just skipping past all that, going forward, I'm going to go ahead and take inventory of the items that I acquired for Thankful Thursdays, make a library run, and then sort it, and then prepare to put it together to give out in small distributions. I am going to work on my poetry it's tonight. My poetry and my art for tonight. Going to work on that. And then, once I get that and get the performance over with, tomorrow's still a Saturday. I do plan on going to church, that I haven't been to church in forever, just because of whatever happened yesterday. There was love that was shown yesterday. And usually love confuses me and when I say love, I mean agape love, okay? But love confuses me when it's mixed with things that are not so loving, So, and with that particular situation, I don't feel like there was any manipulation. I don't feel like there was, because there's no way. And I can't even, it's a good thing. It was a really good thing that happened. And it really amazed me. Like, I was in shock for a very long time. I'm still in shock, because everything about the way that it occurred was completely pure. There was nothing that was any kind of malfeasance. There was no hesitation. No hesitation. My heart hurts with love, because that was nothing but love. I believe God's love, but the human beings involved had to be the vessels to let that happen. I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't understand it, But again, it's not for me to understand, so I have to let it go. But once I get a chance, I'll share with you the gift that was given to me. And when I say gift, it was the gift of service and of time and of a certain amount of respect. Greatest gifts of all. I still don't know how to take it. I do know how to take it, but it still hasn't, I don't know how to explain what I'm feeling. It's like, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It's simple. But I will share it with you eventually. I just have to come to terms with it first. But there was the individuals involved, they could have just ignored me. Really. Or gaslit me. Or just said some nasty things and whatever. But they did not. They loved me. And when I say loved, I mean agape loved me. Unconditional, as if I was the precious daughter of the organization, which I've always wanted to be. It felt like, and which I claimed, Anyways, I gotta go because I got stuff to do. It's already almost 9:30. I love you with the love of Christ. Goodbye.